All right, I want to take you to just moments ago when we heard from Secretary of State Kristi Noem talking about some of what has happened so far in Texas and how they're helping out. Let's listen in.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you for your leadership. Texas is strong, and the people of Texas are incredibly strong. They've gone through something that is absolutely horrific, and it is heartbreaking to watch these families suffer the way that they are. As soon as this flash flooding event happened, you know, the governor has activated his emergency responders. Nim Kidd is his emergency management director, who is incredible, and has immediately worked with the local first responders to get help to individuals and get them evacuated, put requests into me. We deployed, sir, right away, as you know, because you and I were talking a lot during this time, the Coast Guard. We also had some assets out of Customs and Border Protection. Our BORTAC teams went in and helped with rescues and clearing debris so that we could get roads open and people get the help that they need. I think when I got there the most, sir, that day, as soon as I arrived on site, was getting a briefing from all the emergency responders, was just how unified they were in focusing on the fact that we're there to save lives. They were there to rescue people, find people who were still alive, and to reunify them with their family members. We as a federal government don't manage these disasters. The state does. We come in and support them, and that's exactly what we did here in this situation. FEMA went to an enhanced level immediately, but as soon as you signed the major disaster declaration, we were able to get them resources and dollars right away, just like you envisioned, through state block grants, to help them with cleanup. And we're still there in presence, and FEMA's been deployed, and we're cutting through the paperwork of the old FEMA, streamlining it much like your vision of how FEMA should operate, and it's been a much better response to help these families get through this terrible situation. We still are looking for people. We're still looking for a lot of little girls and other family members that were camping along that river, and they will continue until they find every single person, and we will continue to help them and assist in that. I was surprised when I got there at the camp that day, right after this happened, the parents that were there, the parents that were looking for their children and picking up their daughter's stuffed animals out of the mud and finding their daughter's shoe that might be laying in the cabin, and just hugging and comforting people matters a lot. I'm extremely grateful for God's hand in that whole situation, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were saved. And this is a time for all of us in this country to remember that we were created to serve each other. God created us to take care of each other. And that when we do that, we are happier, we are more fulfilled, and we can walk alongside people on their worst day and help them get through it and come out the other side, knowing that we can continue to live a life that God has purpose for us. So they're grateful for you. Several times the day after the flooding, you and Melania were on the phone with me, and I want to thank you for that. And that meant the world. I was able to tell many of those folks that I had been visiting with you, and that you had said, whatever they need, Kristi, let's deploy it and get it down there and be helpful. And on Sunday, when the families were waiting at a church to identify their children's bodies, Franklin Graham and I called in and prayed with the families and read some scripture with them, and he was incredible in making himself available to that as well. We'll be back down there in a couple of days and continue to do all we can, but this is an unprecedented event. It really is. There's been tragedies like this around the country, but everyone is unique in different situations, and the response the federal government had supporting the state through this, I'm proud of the people that stepped up and immediately came. The Coast Guard, when they came in, they had a difficult time even getting the aircraft in and landed. They had to try several times in the weather to get it in and deploy, and I think we've heard about our one Coast Guard member that was responsible for saving over 165 people, but that entire crew did incredible work. And all the first responders there did incredible work. And I know people are getting tired now, but they're getting reinforcements, and volunteers are showing up, And I just want to commend the governor and his team for being the leaders. And they're so thankful that you're letting them make the decisions and manage the response like it should be. And then us supporting them with the resources of the federal government. We've already deployed dollars to the state, much like the block grants that you've talked about. Right. So they're grateful for that, sir.
There's never been a wave like this outside of the breaking of a dam, because this was almost a wave that ended up being 30 feet high, more actually. Now with a dam you can understand it, but this approached almost with that speed. When you see a dam break, it's not a pretty sight. It wipes out everything, and this is the kind of thing that built up so fast. And it's happened 2 or 3 times before over the years, but not to this extent. But tell them when you met the father who was picking up the daughter's clothing. And,
I had walked through the cabin where all the little girls died, and I had kind of fallen apart in there, but I walked out of the cabin, and a gentleman was standing there, and he said, that man over there needs a hug. And so I walked over to him, and I hugged him, and I said, do you work here? And he said, no, my little girl was in that cabin. And he said, and I just found her best friend about an hour and a half ago. She had passed away. And he just fell apart. And so then we just hugged and talked for probably an hour about that. But then there was another, the grandpa was there looking for his granddaughter as well. There was a dad there of one of the counselors. The counselor was alive, but she was dealing with the fact that she had hung on to some of these girls and was trying to keep them out of the flood waters, and had gotten hit by something and had lost 2 of the girls, and wasn't able to hang on to them, and was going to live the rest of her life thinking about that moment when she wasn't able to hang on to these girls. But these parents were picking up their kids' belongings out of the mud and throughout the camp and putting them in bags. And then one of the dads said, I knew 50 of these girls here. So I knew that was her dress and my daughter's friend's dress. So he was picking it up and putting it in a bag to return to her parents. And so it was and then the director was there comforting everybody who had lost his father the night before too. And he was still there trying to facilitate all of these parents grieving their children and find them. So the strength of people is incredible. One of the things that I asked there today, that day, was that they all have escorts or counselors when parents come in. So from that point, that when they came into the camp, that they have somebody with them when they're going and looking for their children's belongings or looking for their children. And so very emotional.
And you were just listening to the head of the DHS there, Kristi Noem, at the president's cabinet meeting, talking about the devastating, just a sad situation in Central Texas, the deadly flooding that killed hundreds of people, at this point more than 100 people. And she talked about some of the people she met, the grandfather who lost the grandkids while trying to save them, or even the man who was standing by waiting to get a hug from her because he said his daughter was at the campsite that got swept away. So just a devastating situation there. She did also mention that they are doing whatever they can when it comes to resources, money, whatever help is needed for those people right now in Central Texas, which, by the way, recovery, cleanup, search efforts, it continues at this hour. And we know the death toll, as I said, has risen to at least 109 people killed in the flash floods that hit Central Texas. Now, there are questions being raised over how and when people were alerted as those floodwaters rose in the early hours of July 4th. Now, a short time ago, Texas officials, they held a press conference where they were met with questions about how the situation was handled. Listen.
What I can tell you, when I was first notified, it was around the 4 to 5 area. One of my sergeants was in dispatch when the first calls started coming in, the actual 911 calls come in. It was between 4 and 5 when I got notified. Okay, but prior to that, in that 3 to 4 area, my understanding is, and we're in the process of trying to put a timeline. You know, that's going to take a little bit of time. As I've told you several times, that is not my priority this time. There's 3 priorities. That's locating the people out there, identifying and notifying the next of kin. That is what I'm taking as my job as sheriff here to do. Okay.
With all due respect, sir, I think that the community here is asking these questions. What happened? When did it happen? Was the emergency manager awake at the time? Did they push the button to issue an emergency alert?
Sir, it's not that easy. You just push a button, okay? There's a lot more to that. And we've told you several times.
So did it happen, sir?
I can't tell you at this time.
You
Okay.
can't tell-
So as we said, still a lot of questions about what happened leading up to this flooding and whether or not alerts were sent out to people in the area. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Nidia Cavazos, who is in Kerrville for us right now. And Nidia, what stood out to you from that press conference?
Mughal, the search and recovery efforts are still underway here in Kerrville, Texas, but we're learning more details, especially from that press conference. And one thing that stood out was the fact that officials said that the last live rescue was conducted Friday. Now, this was last Friday, last week, and we are now on the 5th day that these searches are being conducted. And so there are many questions remaining here, but local officials did stress that there is a need right now to pray for those who are mourning, who have already been notified that their loved ones didn't make it. They have already rescued their bodies, and they're also asking for prayers for those families that are currently waiting. Now, we are currently in an area where we're witnessing how these volunteers continue to work around the clock. They're searching through debris. They're on horses at this moment, and they're trying to find any potential sign of life here. But the reality is also that this picture keeps getting more and more grim. As I said, this is day 5, and the community here is also asking many, many questions. In fact, could have anything been done different? Could there have been more alerts? Could the city officials have done more here? Now let's take a listen to see what went on at this press conference earlier this morning.
We understand you have many questions.
The judge is not here.
We understand that, but right now, this team up here is focused on bringing people home. That's our focus. All those questions will be answered, but the priority right now
It seems like you're done
is bringing people home.
We totally understand that, and we value the incredible work that is being done by those first responders. We're seeing them out there muddy and sweaty and grinding it out day after day. But your community is asking these questions.
And we will get answers. Right now, all of our resources are focused to recovery.
Who was in charge of the emergency operations center at the time that was getting any briefing?
Do we have another question?
If any.
For the 5th day here in Kerrville, Texas, officials continue to dodge questions as to what exactly happened, what that timeline looks like. Could anything have been done different? But again, local officials are stressing that the priority here is in locating the missing, the unaccounted for. We know that at this moment there are still several young girls from the Camp Mystic who are missing, including one of their counselors, and there are families who are awaiting. So officials here are not answering any questions in terms of what could have been done different. Could there have been a new alarm system, a new alert system installed? But for now, they say it's a matter of locating and notifying any family members.
And okay, so officials are not answering questions about what led up to this, people not being aware of this deadly flooding coming to where they were in that moment. For example, those students at Camp Mystic, they did not get that warning to get them away from the area before all this happened. But then are officials saying anything about proposals to warning systems to hopefully prevent something like this from happening again in the future?
There has been a petition. There is an ongoing petition here in Kerrville, Texas, to install bigger alert systems to where people won't necessarily have to rely on their phone alerts. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick also referenced this, that there is now a need to install these systems. They do recognize that it has been expensive in the past. It requires taxpayers' money. But given the nature of this tragedy, we can assume that there will be significant support to install such systems to where you're not only getting these alerts on your phone, that are also coming in the middle of the night when most people are sleeping.
Wow. Nidia Cavazos in Kerrville, Texas for us. Thank you so much for your reporting.